Hello everyone, this is Little Henry, and today I'm happy to invite my friend Christian come here to have a conversation about the Netherlands general elections.
Hello everyone, I'm Christian Isles. I'm a commissioner for the party of D66 in Enkhuizen, and I've been so for about 2 years.
So first, congratulations, because D66 this year became the second biggest party in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it was quite amazing actually. The campaign was rather intense, and we believed there was a chance we could even be the biggest. So as our campaign manager said, it really is a silver medal with a golden glow.
Yeah, and this week was the Dutch election week. So could you please explain us a little bit what is the Dutch general election?
The national election really begins much earlier than people think. It actually begins when parties create a list of candidates they want to see in the parliament. The parties internally vote on the order, and that matters, which I'll explain later. And then afterwards, they finalize these lists, and then the election begins.
Okay.
So what happens then? If, for example, a party gets 12% of the vote, and that means they get 16 seats, the first 16 on the candidate list go into parliament.
And normally how many people can be on the list for one party?
Well, that depends per party, actually. You see that more older parties who in the past had, majorities or extremely large amount of seats, usually keep around 70 or 80 candidates on the list.
That's a lot, actually, 70 to 80.
Yeah, and these days it's rather unrealistic for them to ever get that amount of seats, but they do keep it because it's a form of tradition, I suppose. But you do see that more newer parties, those who always hung around, 10 or 5 seats, usually are more sober and have about 20, 30 candidates. So it really depends per party.
Okay, and how about the D66? I heard it's a sustainable party. It's more like a growing party, care about the environment. Yeah,
D66 is a lot of things actually. We first began as a kind of like a democratic party. We wanted to renew our government system.
Yeah, so it's a right party or a left party?
It's center-left. If we consider ourselves social liberal, which means that we share points from, for example, the VVD or other liberal parties where we want freedom in the market and we respect individual choices. But we're also social. Like our slogan was, let everybody free, but nobody fall. And that's kind of the core of our philosophy here, where we say you need to have freedom, but obviously, the state needs to be present to maintain a certain quality of life.
Okay, so this year the VVD became the biggest party again, and Rutte became is supposed to become the next prime minister again.
That's true, and quite surprising too. You would think after so many scandals and negative press.
Yeah, I heard about this last month. The government.
Yeah, the government failed really hard on certain.
The kindergarten.
Subjects. Yeah, not the kindergarten, but the child subsidy fees.
The child subsidy fees. So, Christian, what is the difference between VVD and the D66?
Good question. The VVD profiles itself as a law and order party, which is more oriented around commerce and industry and immigration and stuff like that, while D66 is more towards education, green policy. And you notice that D66 is relatively more left than the VVD. In some topics like the climate crisis, much more left. If we weren't a part of the previous cabinet, I don't think the VVD would have had climate policies.
Okay.
And so it's basically a choice about priorities, whether you vote for D66 or not. Do you only care about profits of certain companies? Do you care about the sense of safety? Or do you also think that innovation is important, or investing in education and stuff like that?
Okay, yes, and I remember the general election was 2017, when I was the first year in the Netherlands as a master student in Wageningen University, and at the moment there was one people really famous, that is Wilders.
Wilders?
Yeah, Wilders, because in Netherlands you always compare him with Trump, and he also has a nickname kind of like a Dutch Trump.
That's true, actually. Wilders is a bit of a parliamentary celebrity. He has been there for, I believe, more than 10 years.
Yes.
And, well, he makes a lot of controversial remarks, so he gets a lot of attention in the
What is
media.
his party?
His party is the PVV, the Party for
PVV.
Freedom, yeah.
But actually it's not really free. It's it's called the Party of Freedom, but it's a really right party.
Yeah, it is one of the few far-right parties of the Netherlands, and they believe that there's a profound issue with the presence of Islam in the Netherlands. And although they do have other policies, that's really their one and only issue, immigration and the way that foreigners live in
He
the
really want
Netherlands.
to limit the immigration in the Netherlands. So if he became the Prime Minister in the Netherlands, maybe I will lose my job. Do you think so?
Potentially. He does target certain ethnicities a lot. He doesn't
But
really
I'm a
talk about...
high-skilled migrant, so that makes the story different.
Well, he mostly focuses on Turkish and Moroccan people, and he has proposals to create a ministry where he wants to deport them or pay people to leave the Netherlands. It's to me, it's very bizarre politics, but apparently 17 seats in parliament do support that idea.
And you know, like his hair actually is not naturally blonde. He colored his hair and looks like a really white people. He actually,
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yes. So that is the top 3 biggest party in the Netherlands. And there are also some like interesting parties. For example, like this year, no, not this year, like last year, there was a really handsome candidate.
Oh, which one?
I forgot the name actually, but I remember one thing. A lot of my Chinese girlfriend talked to me. He is really handsome. He even posts his naked picture like on the internet.
You're talking about Thierry Baudet.
Maybe it's him, but he's extremely right people.
Yeah, he's basically what I call PVV zero. He's a far-right party as well in a more modern, fresh kind of presentation. Because, like, on the right, you always had just one party, which was the PVV, and they kept saying the same things in every debate for over 10 years. And now that Thierry Baudet came in, he suddenly has, different policies, different viewpoints, and that for the right-wing voter is very fresh. But he is definitely far-right, and there could be an argument made for even more intense labels than that.
Okay, and my next question is, when the election is over, how the government is formed?
Well, first, the biggest party traditionally gets the privilege to start the cabinet formation.
The cabinet, what is that?
A cabinet is basically all the ministers and the prime minister, state secretary, vice prime minister.
We're from the biggest party.
Not just from the biggest party. So what happens is the biggest party wins, and then they send a scout. And that scout basically asks other parties, hey, are you interested to govern with us? And what kind of compromises do you seek? When they find enough parties to get a majority in parliament, they divide the ministers.
How many ministers? You have the minister for the finance.
Actually, that depends per cabinet, because cabinets can make new portfolios. So, for example, normally it's one minister, one state secretary, but after the tax incident, and the scandal with the discrimination of the tax authority and stuff like that, they, for example, made 2 state secretaries.
And also maybe this year the COVID will maybe also influence the cabinet. Do you think so?
Probably.
For the health and for the medical care system and the health system.
Well, it would be logical that the next cabinet really invests a lot of manpower from like the top executive level to manage the pandemic and a new kind of healthcare system that will be there after the pandemic.
So it's also like really important for the party maintain a good relationship between each other. So for example, if VVD doesn't have a good relationship between the 666 and another, what is the Wilders party? I forgot the name.
PVV.
PVV. So nobody wants to collaborate with them.
Well, you actually see that already because of the statements that PVV and Forum for Democracy made about people who are Islamic. A lot of parties like VVD and D66 already said, we're not going to govern with you.
Then what's gonna happen?
Well, they remain in opposition, and it becomes harder to form a coalition. For example, the last cabinet, which my party was also in with 2 others, then the PVV was the second biggest. So if, the PVV was allowed to govern with the party of the prime minister, then they might have needed like one more party, and they would have had a majority, and things would have been more right-wing and easier. But because they locked these 2 parties out, they have to work with middle parties like D66, but also maybe left-wing parties like the Christian Union from the last cabinet, or the Party for Labour.
Okay, so Christian, which party do you think would benefit me as an expat?
Well, there are multiple parties, of course, my own, D66.
Really?
Yeah, we've been historically an education party, and we support a lot of programs where we have exchanges between universities and where we invest in innovation and better education overall. But to be fair in this conversation, there are more parties.
Be neutral, yeah.
Yeah, there is Volt, a newcomer in our parliament, a pan-European party who has a lot of similar policies as D66 when it comes to education. Also with, European exchanges and going international and stuff like that. Also a lot of left-wing parties, I would say, like the Green Left or the Party for Labour. Are also very internationally oriented. They all support, for example, the Erasmus program, where European citizens can study elsewhere. They generally support the arrival of knowledge migrants to work in our, for example, the Brain Centrum in Eindhoven and places like that. But yeah, and to be honest, I think the VVD generally supports that too, but more from an economic standpoint.
Yes.
So they really look at the bottom line, like, okay, do they bring more money in?
Do they added value to the whole Dutch society? Yes, but I also heard my other Dutch friends told me, like VVD, they promised something, but they didn't do it.
You hear that a lot, actually.
Yes, lots of my Dutch colleagues and friends complain about Rutte. They always promise they will finish a kind of project. For example, they will make the starter more easier to get a house to live.
Well, to be devil's advocate, it is kind of inherent to the Dutch system that during campaigns you make promises, and then when you form a cabinet, because of compromises, you abandon some points. I believe that most parties have done so in history, and that is generally accepted. But what I personally feel about VVD and what I hear around me too, is that they made a lot of extravagant promises and present themselves as a party that governed the Netherlands well, despite there being a lot of very big and complicated issues. A lot of healthcare costs. We had the tax authority scandal. A lot of budget cuts on police. And now, you invested in education and in healthcare, but under Rutte, there became a massive bureaucracy in the healthcare industry. So I can understand that, people hear him say, oh, we're going to make things cheaper, things will work, and then they don't.
I can understand that. So I have a really interesting question. Do you know what is the salary of the Prime Minister?
I believe before taxes about 15,000 euros, which after taxes should be about 8,000.
400, 500 something.
Yeah.
So actually that's not much. It's like a senior or the manager level kind of in the Netherlands in a big company.
It's a very sober salary, and that came to be because of his predecessor called Balkenende, who established what we call the Balkenende norm, which basically the Balkenende norm, and it set a limit of salaries of politicians and made them.
You have the law to limit the salary.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the idea of that is that it's more representative of salaries that Dutch people, earn in the market, to bring politics, closer to the living Dutch people.
Okay. And thank you, Christian, for coming here today to give us a little lesson. And I learned quite a lot about the Dutch general election.
No problem, I'm glad. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening, and remember to vote in the municipal elections.
Okay, yeah, and if you like my video, please press like, hit the bell, and subscribe. I'm Little Henry. See you next time. Bye bye.